Zinnia had always been a quiet soul, someone whose presence was soft but deeply felt. In the small town she lived in, people often overlooked her, not because she was invisible, but because her strength was subtle, patient, and gentle. She observed life more than she participated in it, noting how hurried everyone seemed, chasing instant gratification or fleeting success. Her own life had been slow to unfold, but Zinnia had begun to understand that patience was not about waiting, it was about learning, growing, and trusting the unseen process. Her days began with the soft hues of dawn spilling into her tiny apartment. The scent of coffee brewing in the corner kitchen, mingling with the earthy smell of morning rain, was a comfort she cherished. While others rushed into the day's chaos, Zinnia spent her early hours walking through the narrow cobblestone streets, greeting the town's stray cats and the occasional early vendor setting up a stall. She found beauty in simplicity, a cracked window that caught sunlight at just the right angle, a bird nesting in the corner of a balcony, or the quiet laughter of an old couple walking hand in hand. Zinnia's patience was often tested, though, by the world outside her small, carefully curated routine. She had dreams, faint whispers that called her from within, urging her to create, to build something lasting. Yet, the path to those dreams was not clear, and every time she tried to step forward, life seemed to push her back, in small ways that felt disproportionate. A missed opportunity, a failed attempt, a misunderstanding with someone she trusted, these were not dramatic setbacks, but they chipped away at her confidence. Still, she persisted, silently learning from each experience. One of the most significant lessons came from the garden she tended on her balcony. The garden was modest, a few pots of herbs, a couple of flowering plants, and one stubborn rose bush that refused to bloom despite Zinnia's care. Many nights, she found herself staring at it, frustrated that all her effort seemed wasted. Yet, she continued watering, pruning, and whispering encouragement to the plant. Months later, after what felt like endless trial, the bush produced a single, perfect blossom. Zinnia's joy was not in the speed of its growth but in witnessing the quiet unfolding of life that rewarded patience. It was a lesson she carried silently into every corner of her life. Progress often came in unseen, slow, but beautiful increments. Life, however, demanded more than nurturing plants, it demanded resilience in the face of human unpredictability. Zinnia worked as a freelance writer, taking small assignments that others often ignored. The pay was meager, the recognition almost non-existent, but she saw every project as a step forward, a way to refine her voice. Writing became her sanctuary, a place where she could pour the frustrations of the world into words and transform them into something meaningful. Each article, each story, was a seed planted. Not all would flourish immediately, but some would take root, quietly growing into something substantial. One particularly rainy afternoon, Zinnia faced a challenge that tested her patience beyond her small comforts. A client she had worked tirelessly for decided to cancel a long-term contract at the last minute, citing budget cuts. The disappointment stung, but more than that, it was the uncertainty that gnawed at her, the fear that her work, her persistence, might never be valued. She considered giving up, retreating into the comfort of her predictable routines, and leaving the uncertain world of freelance work behind. But then she remembered the rose bush, the slow bloom, and the quiet joy of each small success she had nurtured. Giving up now would be to deny the very lessons life had taught her about patience and resilience. Determined not to let setbacks define her, Zinnia decided to focus on what she could control, herself. She created a structured daily routine, balancing her work, her garden, and the simple joys of life that nourished her spirit. She began exploring the town more intentionally, meeting local artisans and small business owners. She listened to their stories, shared her own quietly, and discovered that patience was a shared thread in many of their lives. One elderly craftsman told her, "The wood teaches you patience. It won't bend or shape the way you want until you understand it." That statement resonated deeply with Zinnia, mirroring her own experiences with both her plants and her writing. Life, like the wood or the rose bush, had its own pace. Her role was not to rush it, but to engage with it attentively and faithfully. As days turned into weeks, Zinnia began to notice subtle shifts in her life. A small article she had written months ago went viral unexpectedly, earning her recognition she had never sought. A stranger reached out, offering a collaborative project that aligned perfectly with her values and passions. These successes were small, not earth-shattering, but each felt like a reward for her persistence. The slow work, the quiet patience, was bearing fruit. And yet, she understood that the true reward was not in external acknowledgement, it was in the inner peace and confidence that grew from trusting the process. Evenings were Zinnia's favorite time of day. She would light a single candle, sit by the window, and watch the town settle into the quiet of night. The streetlights flickered on, casting golden pools of light on the cobblestones. She often thought of life as a series of such quiet evenings, each moment full of potential if one could only pause long enough to notice. Patience, she realized, was not passive. It was active attention, a willingness to stay engaged with the world even when outcomes were uncertain. It was the discipline of waiting without surrender, the courage to keep nurturing seeds whose bloom was not yet visible. One night, as she closed her journal and reflected on the week, Zinnia felt a shift within herself. The fear of failure that had haunted her for years seemed lighter, almost distant. She understood that the path to her dreams was not a straight line, nor was it supposed to be. Each small step, each patient effort, was a part of the journey, a part of building something enduring. And in that realization, she found strength, not the explosive, dramatic kind often celebrated in stories, but a quiet, unshakable power that could carry her through life's uncertainties. The morning sun streamed through Zinnia's window, brushing her small apartment with golden warmth. The world outside moved with its usual frantic rhythm, but Zinnia's pace remained deliberate, measured. She had learned that rushing never brought clarity, only restlessness and missed lessons. Today, however, the calm she had cultivated would be tested in ways she had not anticipated. It began with a letter, thin, unassuming, yet carrying a weight that made her heart tighten. It was from a local community center, inviting her to lead a small project, documenting the stories of townspeople whose voices were often overlooked. Zinnia had never imagined herself in a leadership role. She was accustomed to being a quiet observer, a listener, someone who contributed in subtle ways. The request ignited both excitement and fear. Could she step beyond the shadows of her own comfort? Could she trust herself to guide others without faltering? For a week, she hesitated. Each morning, she sat with the letter on her lap, reading and rereading it, feeling the pulse of possibility. Yet, self-doubt clawed at her. She worried that she might fail publicly, that her inexperience would be exposed. But one evening, as she tended her rose bush, she remembered the months of careful nurturing, the single bloom that had emerged after so much patience. Just as the rose had required consistent care, she realized that she could approach this new opportunity step by step, moment by moment. Zinnia accepted the invitation, quietly deciding to face the unknown with patience as her companion. The first day at the community center was nerve-wracking. She walked through the wooden doors, the familiar scent of old books and polished floors wrapping around her. Faces turned toward her, curious, hopeful, expectant. Zinnia smiled softly, introduced herself, and began listening. Each story she encountered was a revelation. An elderly fisherman spoke of decades spent battling storms at sea, his hands weathered, his eyes reflecting both joy and loss. A young mother shared the quiet struggles of raising her children while working multiple jobs. A widower recounted the loneliness that had followed him for years, punctuated by moments of deep, unexpected beauty. Zinnia realized that patience was not only her own virtue, it was embedded in the lives of those around her. Everyone she met had endured, had waited, had persisted in their own way. Yet, not all encounters were easy. Some stories carried anger, bitterness, or sorrow that was hard to absorb. One afternoon, a man refused to speak, his face etched with distrust. Zinnia felt her patience stretched thin. She wanted to push, to insist, to coax him into sharing. But she remembered the lessons of her garden, of the rose bush that resisted bloom. True patience, she reminded herself, meant allowing space and time, not forcing outcomes. So she sat quietly, offering presence rather than words, and waited. Weeks later, the same man returned, this time ready to share. Zinnia realized that patience was not passive, it was active, attentive, and sometimes invisible in its power. Her own work began to flourish alongside these experiences. Small articles documenting these stories caught the attention of a regional magazine, which published them with Zinnia's byline. Recognition, however, did not transform her. She remained grounded, understanding that the value of her work lay not in applause but in impact. Each story preserved the memory of resilience, courage, and hope, and in that, Zinnia found purpose. But life, as it always does, continued to test her in ways she could not predict. A sudden illness struck her father, who lived in another city, and Zinnia had to travel to care for him. The journey was exhausting, both physically and emotionally. She faced long hours of waiting at hospitals, dealing with bureaucracy, and comforting her worried family. Her patience was tested daily, often to its limits. She discovered that patience was not only about waiting quietly, it was about staying compassionate, steady, and resilient when circumstances were draining. During this period, Zinnia began to understand the deeper layers of patience. It was not simply enduring life's challenges, it was embracing them fully, learning from them, and allowing them to refine one's character. Her father's recovery was slow, marked by small victories and occasional setbacks. Zinnia found herself recalling the countless hours she had spent tending her rose bush, riding through frustration, and listening without judgment at the community center. Each moment of patience she had practiced became a tool, a source of inner strength she could draw upon when life demanded it most. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Zinnia stood on her father's balcony, overlooking the city's glittering lights. She felt a sense of clarity she had never known before. Life's unpredictability was not a threat, it was a teacher. Patience was not a simple virtue but a profound power, one that transformed struggle into understanding, waiting into growth, and ordinary moments into lessons of the heart. Returning to her town, Zinnia noticed subtle changes in herself. She approached each interaction with calm confidence, aware of the invisible currents of life that connected all her experiences. Her garden flourished more than ever, the rose bush had multiplied, sending out tender shoots that promised more blooms. Her writing had matured, infused with empathy and insight gained from both her personal and observed experiences. People around her began to notice a quiet radiance, a sense of grounded presence that drew others without effort. It was in the small acts of daily life that Zinnia discovered her power most profoundly. She offered her neighbor help with heavy groceries, not expecting gratitude. She listened to a child's unfiltered questions about life and death, answering with honesty tempered by patience. She forgave slights that once would have wounded her deeply. Each act reinforced her understanding that patience was not simply waiting, it was living fully, choosing understanding over reaction, growth over frustration. And yet, even as her inner world strengthened, challenges continued to arrive. An unexpected financial setback threatened her ability to maintain her projects, and a personal betrayal left her questioning the reliability of human trust. The lessons of patience, however, had rooted deeply within her. She met each trial with calm determination, reminding herself that growth was never linear, and that every obstacle contained within it the seeds of resilience. Zinnia had grown in ways she could not have foreseen. She had faced uncertainty, illness, human complexity, and personal disappointment, and each time, patience had guided her through. She had discovered that the true measure of strength was not speed, recognition, or immediate success, but the ability to endure, nurture, and remain steadfast. The hidden power she carried was no longer theoretical, it was alive within her, quietly shaping her every thought, action, and decision. Zinnia's journey was far from over. Greater challenges and deeper revelations awaited her, but she no longer feared the unknown. She had learned that patience was not just a strategy for surviving life, it was a pathway to thriving within it. Each step she took, each act of care and understanding, built a foundation for a life rich in meaning, resilience, and subtle, enduring joy. In the quiet of her evening walks, Zinnia often paused to reflect, feeling the gentle rhythm of life pulse around her. She understood now that the hidden power of patience was not merely waiting, it was the capacity to transform waiting into wisdom, struggle into growth, and ordinary moments into extraordinary lessons. Zinnia awoke to the gentle hum of morning life, the town stirring outside her window. The days no longer felt like a sequence of isolated events but threads in a vast, intricate tapestry. Each challenge she had faced, every moment of waiting, every seed of effort she had planted, had contributed to the growth of something far greater than herself. She had learned that patience was not simply an act, it was a way of being, a lens through which life revealed its deeper truths. Her projects at the community center had grown in scope. What began as a small initiative to collect stories of overlooked townspeople had blossomed into a recognized platform for voices that society often ignored. Zinnia's writing had evolved alongside it. She wrote not to impress but to illuminate, capturing the resilience, hopes, and hidden struggles of people around her. Each piece carried a quiet power, a subtle force that inspired readers to pause, reflect, and appreciate the depth of life in its uncelebrated forms. Despite the outward success, Zinnia remained humble. She understood that true power did not lie in recognition or praise, but in the transformation of one's own heart. She spent her mornings in her garden, tending to the rose bushes that had once seemed stubborn and unyielding. Now, the balcony bloomed with color, a testament to the persistence she had cultivated over years. She often laughed quietly to herself, recalling the first hesitant buds that had required endless patience. Life, she realized, mirrored the garden. With consistent care, attention, and patience, beauty would always find a way to emerge. One afternoon, Zinnia received a letter that would bring a new dimension to her journey. It was an invitation to speak at a town-wide gathering, sharing her experiences with patience, resilience, and self-growth. She hesitated. Public speaking had never been her strength, and the thought of addressing a large audience made her heart flutter with anxiety. But then she considered all she had learned. Patience was not about avoiding fear, but embracing it, stepping forward even when uncertainty loomed. The day of the gathering arrived. Zinnia stood behind the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, some familiar, some strangers. She spoke softly at first, recounting her journey from quiet observation to active engagement, from doubt to steady confidence. She shared her lessons from the rose bush, from the stories of the townspeople, from moments of personal struggle and resilience. As she spoke, she noticed nods of recognition, tears in the eyes of some, smiles of understanding from others. Her words were not dramatic or grandiose. They did not rely on flashy rhetoric or exaggerated emotion. They carried the quiet authority of lived experience. She spoke of patience as a living force, a power that allowed one to endure, to nurture, and to create meaning in the midst of uncertainty. She shared that true growth was often invisible, slow, and unremarkable to outsiders, yet profoundly transformative for the person cultivating it. After her speech, people approached her, not to praise, but to share their own stories of struggle, waiting, and quiet victories. A young woman spoke of her efforts to start a small bakery despite repeated failures. An elderly man described the decades he had spent teaching without recognition, now inspired to continue with renewed vigor. Zinnia listened to each story, offering a presence that validated their experiences. She realized that patience was not just a personal practice, it was contagious. By embodying it, she empowered others to cultivate it in their own lives. Zinnia's life continued to unfold with deliberate grace. She no longer measured success by material gains or public acknowledgement, but by the depth of engagement, the quality of connection, and the subtle growth she witnessed in herself and others. She understood that patience was a dynamic force, requiring awareness, adaptability, and courage. It demanded persistence in the face of frustration, compassion in the midst of conflict, and faith when outcomes remained unseen. Yet, even as she embodied these lessons, life continued to test her. A sudden storm struck the town, damaging parts of her beloved garden and the community center where she had invested so much effort. Others might have despaired, but Zinnia approached the situation with calm determination. She rallied volunteers, worked alongside them to repair the damage, and found joy in the collective effort. Once again, she witnessed the hidden power of patience, the ability to remain composed, to act with intention, and to inspire resilience in others, even when circumstances seemed adverse. Through these experiences, Zinnia came to a profound understanding: patience was not a passive trait, nor was it merely endurance. It was an active engagement with life's rhythms, an ability to perceive and respect the unfolding of events, and a commitment to nurturing growth, both in oneself and in the world around. It was a force that transformed waiting into wisdom, struggle into insight, and ordinary moments into opportunities for extraordinary growth. As years passed, Zinnia's influence quietly spread. Her writings continued to touch lives far beyond the borders of her small town. People sought her advice, not for instant solutions, but for guidance on cultivating inner strength and resilience. Yet, she remained humble, attributing her growth to the countless small lessons she had learned along the way: the stubborn rose bush, the overlooked stories of townspeople, the patient tending of her own heart. Even in solitude, Zinnia found profound fulfillment. She walked through her garden, observed the simple joys of daily life, and reflected on her journey. She realized that patience had not merely helped her survive life's challenges, it had transformed her experience of life itself. Every moment, whether of joy or hardship, became an opportunity for growth, understanding, and connection. She had discovered that the hidden power of patience was not something external to be achieved, it was a living, breathing force within, accessible to anyone willing to embrace it fully. In the quiet of the evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Zinnia sat by her window, watching the town settle into gentle stillness. She felt a sense of completeness, not of perfection, but of alignment. Life had unfolded in its own time, and she had unfolded with it, patiently, attentively, and courageously. She smiled, knowing that the lessons she had learned were not hers alone, but gifts to share through presence, action, and example. And so, Zinnia continued her life with grace, patience, and quiet power. She understood that challenges would always come, that setbacks were inevitable, and that the pace of growth could never be rushed. Yet she also knew that within every challenge lay opportunity, within every moment of waiting lay potential, and within every small act of care lay the seeds of profound transformation. The hidden power of patience, she realized, was not hidden at all, it was simply waiting to be embraced, nurtured, and lived. Her journey, though filled with trials and uncertainties, had revealed a truth that transcended circumstance. Patience was not just about waiting for life to happen, it was about living fully, attentively, and with unwavering trust in the unfolding of one's own path. And in that truth, Zinnia found the deepest, most enduring victory of all.